Halo has been a juggernaut in the gaming world since Combat Evolved launched nearly 20 years ago. In the time since, much has changed about the franchise, and much has not. In the lead up to Halo Infinite, the first entry on Microsoft's next-gen Xbox Series X console, now is the perfect time to look back at the epic first-person shooter series legacy. How have the adventures of John 117 influenced gaming, and how has each mainline entry in the saga iterated and expanded upon its classic formula? And most importantly, as we all ride the hype train towards Halo Infinite's 2021 release date, what's next for Halo? For longtime Halo fans and newbies to the franchise alike, we're here to give you a definitive overview of Halo's past, present, and future. Halo creator Bungie, many may not know, began by making games exclusively for Mac OS in the 90s. The success of their early works is what moved Microsoft to acquire Bungie in 2000. At which point, Halo had been announced as a third-person shooter for Windows and Mac. Moving forward, the project was overhauled and Halo became a first-person shooter exclusive to Microsoft's upcoming Xbox. Before Halo Combat Evolved was released in 2001, shooters on consoles had almost universally been awkward, janky affairs, largely due to the technical limitations at the time. Halo changed everything, delivering a gorgeous, expansive world that looked, controlled, and sounded unlike anything else on the market. Games for years after Halo's release would adopt similar control schemes, attempt to design similarly lush, open-ended levels, and include robust multiplayer components, so much like Halo's that they would come to be known as Halo clones. Master Chief returned in 2004 alongside a new playable character, the Covenant Arbiter in Halo 2. While Halo 2's campaign gave players more of what they had come to love in Combat Evolved, everything about Halo 2 stood in the shadow of its multiplayer, which exploded alongside Microsoft's fledgling Xbox Live service. Many of the more ambitious ideas for Halo Combat Evolved, like a more in-depth multiplayer suite or vehicles, were cut because of time constraints and a troubled development, but these ideas then became the focus of Halo 2. By 2004, however, the original Xbox was starting to show its age, and the development and production of the next-gen Xbox 360 was ramping into full gear. Halo 3 would be Bungie's first entry on the 7th generation of home consoles, and the leap in fidelity and scope was absolutely huge. Halo 3's campaign, co-op, and huge multiplayer package outright sold the Xbox 360 to countless gamers on release in 2007, 2 whole years after the 360 hit store shelves. With the first trilogy behind them and over 7 years of work done, Bungie had tired of the relentless pace Microsoft demanded they release Halo titles at. After the side project Halo ODST released to reasonable acclaim and success, largely lauded and criticized for being more of the same thing, Bungie began the development of what would be their final Halo game, Halo Reach. Reach was Bungie's swan song, and it took everything Bungie had learned about combat, level design, and the multiplayer experience and added a fine sheen to it. Additions like armor abilities proved even in their final outing Bungie had good ideas left about where Halo could and should go. But after Reach released in 2010, Bungie left Microsoft to sign a deal with Activision Blizzard to produce what would eventually become Destiny. Years later, then leaving Activision Blizzard to go independent. Halo, of course, was too beloved to simply disappear, so Microsoft passed the torch to 343 Industries, a studio that had been formed in 2007 to work on Halo projects like Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. 343's first major entry in the Halo franchise was Halo 4, which released in 2012 and once again followed Master Chief, this time focusing on his relationship with Cortana. Halo 4 launched to immediate success. Many ecstatic the memorable campaign, high production value, and deep multiplayer offering Bungie had delivered, 343 proved capable of delivering as well. 343's follow-up to Halo 4, Halo 5 Guardians, released in 2015 and was another success, though somewhat less so than its predecessor. Its campaign not structured around Master Chief and instead around another Spartan. 343's latest project, Halo Infinite, is a new mainline entry in the Halo series set to drop in 2021 on PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. Halo Infinite will tell another Master Chief story, and will for the first time go open world. While not an entirely traditional open world, Halo Infinite will be moving beyond Halo's traditional mission system for something much more open-ended. Like with some of the changes made in Halo 5, the reaction to Halo Infinite has been mixed. Our first look at Halo Infinite's actual gameplay came at Microsoft's Xbox Games Showcase, an event intended to show gamers what they could look forward to with the next-generation Xbox Series X. Many were looking for a generational leap to demonstrate the enormous power of the new machine, and it stood to reason that Halo, Microsoft's biggest game, would be the perfect series to use to kick the new generation off. Unfortunately, Halo Infinite didn't really wow anybody. The game's presentation, while appealing enough, many called out for looking flat or simply last generation, something likely due at least in part to the way the game handles lighting. While by no means awful looking, Halo Infinite was absolutely not the next-gen showcase that gamers wanted and Microsoft had hoped to deliver. While there still isn't much known about how Halo Infinite's campaign exactly will be structured, the move to a more open world has been met with criticism. Many simply are unhappy Halo's traditional mission setup has been changed, while others take issue with the fact that Halo Infinite's open world doesn't seem to change up the core open world formula in any meaningful way. 343 has gone on record saying they were inspired by Combat Evolved, and the design and style of the earlier games going into Halo Infinite. For some, the familiar art direction and environmental design reads as a return to form, and for others, this is yet another reason to accuse the game of being a rehash of older titles. Halo Infinite's mixed reception is emblematic of the struggle 343 Industries has had with Halo since they took over for Bungie. Bungie stopped making Halo games because they felt like, as a studio, they had done what they could with the franchise, and that it was time for them to move on. 343 entered the picture, and was expected to simply make Halo games as good as Bungie's were, which may not sound like a bad thing, but by following a familiar format, what makes Halo great can eventually feel like just more of the same. This then might suggest all 343 needs to do is innovate and make the Halo game they've always wanted to make. But it's actually a lot more complicated than that. Halo is a massive franchise with a lot of fans who expect their Halo games to play in a certain way, regardless of how samey it may feel looking across all the games. Even the changes 343 has made, like moving Halo into an open world at a time where open world games continue to be massively popular, aren't slam dunks. And many criticize the company for making Halo feel less like Halo and more like a generic shooter because of these kinds of changes. In short, 343 has long since been stuck between a rock and a hard place, wanting to deliver the most innovative, interesting Halo game they possibly can, and still keeping decades-long Halo fans happy. Halo has always had a unique relationship with its fans. Bungie, as an entire company, was purchased to develop Halo for the original Xbox, with Microsoft intending it to be their major system-selling exclusive. Microsoft then pushed Bungie to push out as many Halo games they could, and when they couldn't, they just brought 343 Industries in to do it instead. And all the while, Microsoft went to other studios to develop spin-offs, like the RTS Halo Wars or the twin-stick shooter Halo Spartan Strike. There has been, throughout the course of Halo's lifetime, a constant push to generate more in-universe content, and this isn't relegated to just games. People love Halo, and they want as much of it as they can get. There are dozens of Halo novels, for example. Are many of them fine works of literature in their own right? Maybe not. But Halo is a huge franchise, and huge franchises need lore. So you better believe that lore was created. This give the players what they want approach was, however, built squarely on top of the success of what Bungie called the golden triangle of the mainline Halo games. The weapons, grenades, melee format, where players fight with ranged weapons as well as melee attacks, in addition to access to a limited number of grenades. The Golden Triangle, as well as a lot of familiar weapons, enemies, environments, and themes, appear in all the major entries in the Halo franchise for good reason. It's really fun, and players want all of these things. However, as the years drag on and the heap of Halo-related media grows ever larger, the charm of the same stuff can start to wane. Nowhere is this clearer than in the reaction to Halo Infinite's gameplay. 343, led by the mantra of "give the players what they want," returns the series to its roots by having gamers play as Master Chief once again in a world clearly inspired by the one in Combat Evolved. Seeing the immense popularity of open-world games of the last two generations, 343 decides to open up Halo in response. Considering Microsoft's Xbox Game Pass program and push to put their games on multiple platforms, Halo Infinite's campaign will come to Game Pass while the entire multiplayer component will be free to play. A win for consumers, allowing anybody and everybody to play Halo. All of this, sadly though, is not as it seems. For some, playing once again as Master Chief in a familiar-looking world doesn't sound fresh or particularly next-gen. For some, the plethora of open-world games is daunting and makes them yearn for games that know when to focus their action in more linear levels. For some, a free-to-play monetization model sounds alarm bells of possible loot boxes and predatory microtransactions. For some, even the visual design of the game that harkens back to Halos across the years comes off as lazy and not merely respectful of Halo's oft-lauded aesthetic. Ultimately, as 343 continues to churn out Halo after Halo after Halo, there can be a design-by-committee feeling to their games, much like criticism aimed at recent Ubisoft titles. Ultimately, Halo, for some, has fallen into the trap of being too much of a good thing, and has had trouble evolving in major ways because of it. At the same time, though, Halo continues to not mess around with the core of what has always made the game successful. So, how has Halo changed gaming in your eyes? And what do you think about what you've seen from Halo Infinite? Are you happy with how true to form Halo remains to this day, or are you tired of the same old stuff year after year? Let us know in the comments down below, and for all things gaming, make sure to subscribe to us and ring the bell here at The Gamer.